Amid the dazzling glow of stage lights and the thunderous applause echoing throughout the grand halls of Hollywood's golden age, the public saw only radiant smiles, poetic love stories, and lavish, glittering premieres. Yet behind the curtains lay an entirely different world where secret parties unfolded in silence. Penthouse doors remained tightly shut, and unspoken agreements that never made it onto paper became the price to pay for fame. Some were even pushed into this vicious cycle by their own families, turning their childhood into a mere pawn on the ruthless chessboard of power. In today's video, we will unveil the names of 25 illustrious figures of classic Hollywood legends, once celebrated to the highest degree yet. Behind that brilliance lay pasts intertwined with using their bodies as bargaining tools. Who were they? What did they have to sacrifice to bask in the stage's radiant light? And how could such secrets remain buried for decades? All will be revealed right now. 1. Marilyn Monroe, the Palm Springs Secret and the Unrevealed Medical Records. If you have ever seen Marilyn Monroe on the silver screen flashing that radiant smile and eyes that seem to hold an unspoken invitation, it would be hard to imagine that behind such dazzling glamour lay a past almost no one dared to speak of. In April 1949, when spring was in full bloom in Palm Springs, a luxurious mansion on South Palm Canyon Drive became the site of a private party hosted by Harold Zukor, the powerful mogul of 20th Century Fox. The guest list included New York tycoons, a few renowned directors, and journalists from Variety and the Los Angeles Times. All were restricted to the outer area, while the main room was reserved for a select group of special individuals, among them a then unknown 23-year-old named Norma Jean, who the world would later know as Marilyn Monroe. Charles M. Foster, a freelance photographer who had collaborated with Life magazine, recalled that he had been hired to capture images of the guests. But when he inadvertently stepped into the VIP room, his camera was immediately confiscated. A security guard leaned close to my ear and spoke each word clearly. "Nothing from this party leaves this room." You understand? I understood. And I also knew I had just stumbled into the most forbidden of places. Anthony Ruiz, a waiter at the event, remembered in a 1987 interview with CBS, she was wearing a white satin dress, walking like she just stepped out of a dream, but her eyes were filled with sadness. A powerful man whispered something to her. She nodded gently and left the room for nearly an hour. When she returned, her lipstick was smudged, her hair slightly tousled, yet she smiled as if nothing had happened. What's notable is that only a few weeks after that night, Marilyn began appearing at high-profile screen tests. The press hailed her as Hollywood's new discovery, but backstage whispers about Palm Springs still lingered. Gradually, murmurs began to surface. Nurses at a Los Angeles maternity clinic claimed they often saw Marilyn arriving either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, always wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark glasses to avoid recognition. A tabloid even hinted she had undergone at least one abortion during 1950-1951, though no proof was ever produced. Those close to her said that from then on, Marilyn frequently fell into bouts of depression. On the set of All About Eve, she could beam brilliantly for the cameras, but once the dressing room door closed, she would sit in silence for hours, her eyes vacant. One old friend whispered, "She never truly left that room in Palm Springs, even though she walked out of it long ago." The photographs from that night were said to be locked away in Zukor's safe, while her medical records disappeared over time. Palm Springs remains a shadow haunting Marilyn's story, perhaps destined to live on only as rumors no one dares confirm. And this was only the beginning. For next, we turn to Elvis Presley, America's golden boy, who also carried secrets about power-laden relationships in the shadows, secrets few have dared to bring to light. To Elvis Presley, the mysterious patron and the price behind the spotlight. Memphis, late 1953. Elvis Presley, just 18 years old, was living with his mother in a small apartment on Winchester Street. By day, he worked as a factory laborer. By night, he frequented tea rooms and bars where drifters and musicians gathered. It was said that in one such smoke-filled evening, Elvis first met Gladys Porter, a businesswoman nearly 2 decades his senior, well known for investing in fledgling music projects. According to financial records later exposed by the Memphis Commercial Appeal within just 6 months, Elvis suddenly had enough money to buy a brand new suit, a Gibson guitar, and was often seen at upscale hotels like the Peabody and the Chiska, venues where Gladys was also spotted. A hotel clerk at the Chiska recounted in 1982. They usually arrived late at night, always booking a top-floor suite. Elvis often carried his guitar. When they left, Gladys would hand him an envelope, and I never once saw him count it. Rumors of an unnamed contract between Elvis and Gladys grew louder when a nurse at a private clinic in East Memphis revealed that Elvis had visited multiple times for reproductive health checkups, despite not having a public girlfriend at the time. His attending physician in a 1987 interview with Rolling Stone said with a hint of meaning he was perfectly healthy, but he often asked for sleeping pills. I think he was trying to forget something. In 1954-1955, Elvis began performing on the stage of Sun Records. Few knew that after each show, he often boarded cars headed to undisclosed destinations. A limousine driver told WMC-TV in the 1970s, "I drove him to many mansions around Memphis, sometimes even to Nashville. The guests there were always wealthy and powerful, and he always left very late alone." When Elvis signed a lucrative contract with RCA in 1955, Gladys Porter suddenly vanished from Memphis without a trace. The Nashville Banner once posed the question, had her investment paid off enough for her to walk away, or had she been forced to disappear to keep silent? To this day, the debate remains, did Elvis become the king of rock solely through raw talent, or were there shadowy arrangements behind the stage lights? Only those directly involved know the truth. And if Elvis's story surprises you, be prepared for John Wayne, the immortal cowboy icon, who was once rumored to be entangled in backroom dealings that could shake Hollywood to its core. 3. John Wayne, the unfinished reel of a legend. Summer 1933. When the name John Wayne was still attached only to small supporting roles in B-grade westerns produced by Monogram Pictures, he often frequented a private club in West Hollywood, a place where directors and producers hosted small film screenings. One July evening, a young photographer named Leonard Hale brought along a 16mm reel capturing scenes of a beach party in Malibu. In a few fleeting seconds of the film, Wayne could be seen embracing an older man believed to be a prominent producer at the studio. Trouble began when the reel intended for private viewing only was stolen. Just weeks later, the Hollywood Mirror received a 30-second cut from the reel, along with an anonymous note. "Your cowboy isn't what the audience thinks he is." The studio acted swiftly. Wayne's representatives, accompanied by 2 lawyers, met with the Hollywood Mirror's editor-in-chief and bought all rights to the footage for a sum rumored to be $25,000, an enormous figure for the time. Even so, the gossip spread, and tabloids began publishing cryptic lines about a young star caught in an unusual relationship. In a 1954 interview with the Saturday Evening Post, when asked about the matter, Wayne merely smiled and said, "Hollywood's always got someone looking to pull you down. I just have to ride right over them." Yet those who were at the West Hollywood Club that night still insist the 16mm reel exists, and that a secret copy remains in the private collection of an unidentified collector. The film has never resurfaced, but it left a fracture in the invincible cowboy image Wayne had built. And if you think this scandal was shocking Clint Eastwood, the next generation of Hollywood's cowboys would later make the industry blush with an even more uncontrollable string of secrets. 4. Clint Eastwood, the cowboy who once served as a nude living statue at high society parties. Few would have guessed that before stepping into Hollywood, Clint Eastwood had lived a life both vibrant and scandalous in San Francisco. In the 1950s, he was just a poor young man making a living as a nude model for art classes at Mission Art School. It was there that Eastwood caught the eye of Evelyn Carter, the wealthiest widow in Pacific Heights. Evelyn not only hired him as her private model, but also ushered him into the world of exclusive art soirees where he would become a living statue in the center of her living room. At these parties, Clint would stand motionless for dozens of minutes, his body coated in shimmering silver or gold paint surrounded by the murmur of conversations, the clink of crystal glasses, and half-joking, half-serious remarks about this living artwork. More than a few guests were said to have been a little too eager in their curiosity, and Clint was believed to have learned how to maintain a fixed smile even as his eyes told an entirely different story. The climax came in the autumn of 1954 during a Bonhams auction. A collector accidentally brought out a large-format photograph of Clint completely nude, posed like a Greek god with candlelight, casting a glow that made the image look like a scene from a film. The moment the photograph was displayed, the auction room buzzed with excitement. A reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle present at the event quickly documented it and sent it to the newsroom, intending to place it on the front page of the next morning's edition. But only a few hours later, a black Cadillac stopped in front of the building, and Evelyn stepped out carrying a thick envelope. The result was that the next day's edition contained no headline about the photograph at all, replaced instead by news of a flower exhibition at Golden Gate Park. It seemed the matter had been put to rest, but a week later, the only surviving print of the photograph unexpectedly appeared at a Paris antique market, shocking the American fine art photography community. Years later, rumors persisted that the current owner of the image was none other than a famous Hollywood actor who had once shared a film set with Clint. 5. Steve McQueen, from trading love for opportunity to Hollywood's king of secret parties. By the time Steve McQueen had become an A-list star with Bullitt and The Great Escape, audiences saw only the image of a rebellious man on a motorcycle living freely. Yet behind the scenes, Hollywood whispered a different story. McQueen had not only clawed his way up from the bottom through sheer audacity, but had also skillfully turned that past into a tool for influence. In the early days of his career, McQueen had accepted private invitations from certain powerful figures simply to secure a minor role or a chance to appear on screen. But once fame was his, the tables turned. From being chosen, he became the one who chose. McQueen became the focal point of discreet gatherings held in Beverly Hills mansions, Malibu beachfronts, and luxurious penthouses in Las Vegas. The guest list included top producers and directors, and McQueen would bring along a group of young faces he deemed full of potential. According to paparazzo George Brim, McQueen personally reached out to James Dean, Jan Michael Vincent Big, Wednesday Robert Conrad, the Wild Wild West, and even Ali MacGraw before she became his wife to attend parties he described as relaxed spaces for networking. In reality, these nights often stretched until dawn, and many guests left with either a promised contract or a bond that was difficult to define. An internal memo from the Los Angeles Police Department in 1977, signed by Detective Edward Fallon, hinted that McQueen provided for every special request of VIP guests, including luxuries that only the powerful could touch. Though this file never made it to court, those in the film industry understood that McQueen could offer something at these gatherings that kept people coming back. And it wasn't just the alcohol or the music. Those who had once been in McQueen's network said he always positioned himself at the center of these shadowy dealings. Actors seeking roles would approach him, and those seeking fresh faces would too. And Steve, with his trademark half smile, served as the bridge for both sides. If McQueen orchestrated the backstage world through carefully arranged power meetings, then James Dean, the rebel angel, walked straight into it, becoming the central figure in a secret deal whose consequences would linger for years. 6. James Dean, the rebel angel and the knight on the 14th floor of Warner Bros. By late 1953, James Dean was still a skinny young man delivering mail in New York, dreaming of setting foot on a major film set. It was Steve McQueen, already well known at the time, who leaned in and told Dean at a Greenwich Village bar, "I know someone who can open the door for you, but you have to be ready to walk through it." That someone was Howard Starkman, the producer nicknamed the king of leading roles at Warner Brothers, renowned for his power to turn an unknown actor into a star overnight. McQueen brought Dean to a private party on the 14th floor of Warner's headquarters, where Starkman entertained guests in a wood-paneled room overlooking the glowing expanse of Hollywood Boulevard at night. A staff member working that evening recalled, "While the party was in full swing, I saw Dean disappear with Starkman into the mini screening room. The door stayed shut for over an hour, and when they emerged, Dean was buttoning his shirt, while Starkman poured him a drink as if they had just finalized something very important." Only 2 weeks later, Dean received a call for a screen test for East of Eden. Not only did he land the role instantly, but he also received rare privileges, the ability to choose his shooting dates, request script changes, and was given a brand new sports car for his personal use. At the time, the press largely avoided the rumor, except for a piece by Lester Kane of The Hollywood Reporter that hinted Dean just signed a contract that isn't entirely on paper. The article was pulled within 24 hours, but Hollywood's back corridors buzzed with talk that someone had photographed Dean leaving Starkman's private Beverly Hills residence at 3 a.m., wearing Starkman's own shirt. Those close to Dean knew he was uncomfortable with the arrangement, but the Warner Brothers mogul held too many keys in his hand. Over time, Dean began to feel the relationship was a noose tightening around his neck. In September 1955, he confided to a close friend in Los Angeles that he wanted to tell everything and was considering a long interview with a major magazine in which he would reveal how he had truly gotten his first role. Just days later, on September 30th, 1955, while on his way to Salinas for a race, Dean's Porsche 550 Spider collided head-on with another car. He died instantly at the age of 24. The death was recorded as a traffic accident, but to those who knew the story of the 14th floor, it was far too perfect a coincidence not to question. 7. Elizabeth Taylor, the purple jewel on MGM's chessboard. In the 1960s, Elizabeth Taylor was not only Hollywood's #1 star, but was also entrusted by MGM with special assignments whenever the studio needed to maintain relationships with tycoons or influential figures outside the film industry. In MGM's internal records, alongside the name Steve McQueen, Taylor appeared as a behind-the-scenes coordinator, someone with the ability to invite promising young faces to private dinners reserved exclusively for the upper-floor club. One story rarely spoken of took place in 1962. Taylor was said to have personally contacted Lorraine West, a rising actress, inviting her to a party at the seaside estate of Charles Beaumont, the notorious Texas oil magnate. That evening's gathering included not only industrial tycoons, but at least 3 high-ranking figures from Washington, among them a senator in the midst of a presidential campaign. Just 3 days later, Lorraine West unexpectedly appeared in the Los Angeles Daily in a cryptic interview alleging that Hollywood is selling young faces to powerful hands. The article lasted a mere 48 hours before it was removed, and immediately afterward, Lorraine vanished. Friends claimed she intended to fly to New York, but the airline had no record of such a trip. A witness in Santa Monica swore they saw Lorraine step into a black Cadillac, after which she was never seen again. A former MGM assistant whispered, "What happened to Lorraine made everyone realize this was no longer Hollywood's game alone. Once you touched names in politics, the line between cinema and power became lethally dangerous." Elizabeth Taylor never publicly commented on the Lorraine West incident, but many believe that after that episode she became even more discreet, and if she did extend invitations, they were carried out with such precision that no trace was ever left. 8. Clark Gable, the companion past in the phantom reel of Hollywood. In the summer of 1973, nearly a decade after Clark Gable's death, investigative reporter Arthur Jennings of the Los Angeles Times stumbled upon a dusty file in the archives of the LAPD. The file detailed personal service activities at a number of elite clubs in Hollywood in the early 1920s, and one name appeared repeatedly: William Clark Gable. According to a 1923 statement from the manager of the Roosevelt Hotel, Gable, then in his early 20s, was often hired by wealthy women to accompany them to events, and afterward would stay on for private conversations until morning. A bartender vividly recalled, "He wasn't just handsome, he had a way of speaking so charming that everyone wanted to be around him." The file also recorded detailed payments by check signed under the name of a major Paramount Pictures producer's wife. Notably, the list of regular patrons included a female California state senator who had been embroiled in a sensational divorce scandal in 1925. Jennings wrote that the deeper he dug, the more he realized this was not simply the story of a young man making a living, but a glimpse into an entire underground network where beauty and charm were traded like currency. Gable may have thought he was just doing what it took to survive. Jennings wrote, "But in Hollywood of that era, debts like these were never forgotten." When the investigation was about to go to print, the editorial board received a call from a prominent attorney demanding the story be killed for the sake of certain families involved. The article was pulled just before publication, and within a week, the file disappeared from the archives. Clark Gable was no longer alive to answer, but his shadow in those luxury hotel rooms of the past still makes Hollywood whisper that the road to the king of the silver screen's throne may have begun with nights never recorded in any contract. 9 Frank Sinatra, hidden debts and 4 marriages as a curtain. Frank Sinatra, America's golden voice, has long been celebrated as an icon of romance. But behind the spotlight was a life filled with debts never written in any ledger. In the 1940s, as his career was just taking off, Sinatra often frequented nightclubs in New Jersey and Las Vegas where the mafia controlled everything, from the bands to the liquor lists. There he had access to luxuries that only insiders knew how to trade: bootleg liquor, rare antiques, and the white powder that could keep a person alert all night. But those expenses quickly exceeded his income, forcing Sinatra to accept private invitations from powerful figures to sing at parties where recording was strictly forbidden, to serve as a companion for those wishing to hide their loneliness. Rumors once swirled about a same-sex relationship between him and a New York tycoon, prompting Sinatra to act immediately. Only a few months later, he married Nancy Barbato, his first wife. But the marriage did not kill the rumors, and it ended after 12 years. His next 3 marriages, to Ava Gardner, Mia Farrow, and Barbara Marx, also collapsed quickly. All 4 shared one thing in common: no children were born. Industry insiders believe this was a deliberate choice to avoid tying himself to any relationship long enough for the past to resurface. If Sinatra used marriage as a smokescreen to divert public attention, Paul Newman, Hollywood's striking blue-eyed face, chose another path, stepping into the private service world during his unknown years, turning himself into a commodity for those with the money and power to purchase his company. 10 Paul Newman, The Secret Evenings on Park Avenue. Before becoming an American cinema icon with his mesmerizing blue eyes, Paul Newman lived through a chapter of life few could imagine. In the mid-1950s, still an unknown stage actor in New York, Newman juggled odd jobs just to survive. Yet the rent for his tiny Manhattan apartment and the tuition at the actor's studio constantly exceeded what he could afford. It was during his nights working as a waiter at a private club on Park Avenue that Newman caught the attention of a very particular circle of patrons: wealthy businessmen, politicians, and art collectors. An acquaintance in the scene later revealed that Newman had been invited to attend private parties where his role extended far beyond chatting or raising a glass. They called it companion service, but everyone understood it as a privilege reserved for those willing to pay handsomely for the presence of a young, handsome, and enigmatic face. One of Newman's closest patrons was Thomas Fairchild, a New York State senator preparing for a national campaign. Their connection remained discreet until the fall of 1956, when Fairchild became entangled in a financial scandal. Reporters traced his trail back to the private gatherings he had attended, and Newman's name appeared on the guest list for at least 3 of those events. As soon as the rumors began to spread, Newman vanished from New York for nearly 4 months. He resurfaced only in California, armed with a new film contract from Warner Brothers. No one knows exactly what transpired during that time, but many believe a substantial sum of money changed hands to ensure both parties stayed silent. When an old friend once asked him about that period, Newman simply offered a faint smile and said, "Everyone has a past. The question is whether you're clever enough to turn it into something no one can ever prove." 11. Robert Redford, the blonde in New York's private circuit. Before becoming an icon in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Robert Redford was a slender blonde young man drifting among the luxury apartments of New York's Upper East Side. In the late 1950s, he made a living waiting tables, sketching on the street, and occasionally accepting offers to serve as a companion for society, women seeking a youthful, polished face to accompany them to evening galas. A particular invitation in 1960 changed everything. A wealthy woman introduced Redford to Vincent Morelli, the owner of a chain of art galleries who in reality ran a high-end companion brokerage. Here, Redford's role went far beyond being a +1 at parties. He was trained to read clients' psychology, master the art of conversation that struck just the right balance between intimacy and distance, and most importantly, leave no trace behind. Morelli's clientele extended far beyond artists and collectors to include power players in Washington. One winter night in 1962, Redford was assigned to accompany the wife of a senator campaigning for re-election. As they left the Plaza Hotel, the two were followed by a paparazzo. In the dim streetlight, the grainy image could easily have ignited a political scandal if not for Morelli's swift intervention. And intervention in this case meant the film roll and the camera vanished overnight, while the photographer left New York the very next morning. From that moment, Redford was no longer just a companion, he had become a strategic asset in Morelli's network. Every one of his early Hollywood contracts bore the fingerprints of relationships cultivated in those discreet evenings. As one insider put it, Robert knew he was walking a tightrope. But instead of avoiding it, he learned how to turn that rope into a ladder. 12. Bert Reynolds, the living pawn of the Las Vegas tape. In 1961, Bert Reynolds, then a brawny young man making ends meet as a stripper, was invited to the penthouse of a Las Vegas casino mogul. But this was no ordinary performance. In a plush, red-carpeted room, the golden light traced every contour of Bert's muscles as he moved among a powerful crowd, a federal judge, a top-tier singer, and several political figures the press would only describe as high-level sources. No one realized that behind a mirrored wall, a 16mm camera was silently capturing every glance, every gesture. 2 weeks later, the first envelope arrived. Inside were 3 stills cut from the film along with a short note. "When we call, you show up." And they did call more than once. Year after year, the tape changed hands. One day it was locked in the mogul's safe, the next in the possession of a major film producer, and later in the grip of an underground broker. Each new holder had different demands: attend a party with someone, take a role in a flop to salvage a director's reputation, or join private trips the media would never hear about. Bert never refused. He knew that the release of a single frame could destroy every endorsement deal and acting contract overnight. In Hollywood, an old friend of Bert's once said, "It's not about what you've done, it's about who holds the proof you did it." For more than a decade, Bert lived as a pawn anyone could flip at will. He once admitted over drinks, "I was nothing more than an item in an auction where the buyer didn't have to pay a dime, just own the tape." 13. Carrie Grant, Nights at the Malibu Mansion and the Nameless Club. In the late 1930s, whispers circulated through Hollywood about a beachfront mansion in Malibu, where Carrie Grant lived with Randolph Scott. In the press, they were described merely as 2 close friends sharing a home to save costs. But those in the inner circle knew it was in fact a gathering place for exclusive, opulent evenings reserved for a select few of the most powerful faces in town. When night fell, Packards and Cadillacs would quietly pull up to the gates. Inside, the sound of jazz floated from the phonograph drinks, flowed without pause, and the low amber lighting revealed only fleeting silhouettes passing one another. Producers, A-list stars, state senators all mingled in a space where beyond the walls, no one had the faintest idea what was unfolding. One morning in 1941, Malibu was rattled by an unusual story. A delivery man from a nearby grocer, having picked up the wrong order, drove to Grant's mansion. No one answered his knock, so he circled to the backyard. The glass door was ajar. In the living room, the sight stopped him. Cold, fine clothing strewn across the carpet, wine glasses tipped over on the table, and on the chaise near the window, several men lay completely naked, fast asleep after a long night. Among them, he distinctly recognized Carrie Grant and Randolph Scott. He left immediately, abandoning the delivery, but within days the tale had traveled all across Malibu. Everyone had heard it, but no one dared speak of it openly, because the people present that night were the kind who could, with a single phone call, silence every newspaper in the city. Grant never confirmed nor denied the story. Yet, from that point on, invitations to the Malibu mansion became increasingly rare, as though the secret had turned the place into legend, accessible only to those who knew how to keep their mouths shut. If Grant's Malibu was a realm of power hidden behind the sound of the surf rock, Hudson was a man bound by that same power for life, forced to live behind a flawless mask the public could never see through. 14 Rock Hudson, the terrible secret taken to the grave. In the 1950s, Rock Hudson was the embodiment of Hollywood masculinity, his face gracing the covers of major magazines from Life to Photoplay. But to maintain that image, Universal Studios built an invisible glass cage around him, every move monitored, every secret tightly controlled. Beyond his packed filming schedule, Hudson was required to attend private parties at night gatherings of producers, oil tycoons, and high-ranking politicians. At first, he was simply a guest of honor, raising a glass and making conversation. But over time, the demands became explicit. He was to serve drinks, wait on tables, and even spend private time with individuals handpicked by the studio. He could not refuse, for Universal held enough photos and information to destroy his career in an instant. "You're our property," one PR executive once said coldly, "and property is meant to generate profit." By the 1980s, Hudson's health began to decline, and he was diagnosed with AIDS, a disease that carried immense stigma at the time. Instead of receiving support, he was given a warning from his former manager: "If this gets out, it won't just end you. It will take down the people who've protected you." From then on, Hudson lived in silence and depression. On screen, he kept smiling, kept showing up at press conferences, but behind the scenes were sleepless nights, and parties he no longer had the strength to attend yet was still forced to appear at because the threat never went away. Hudson took that secret to the grave in 1985. Only after his death did the public learn the truth. But for those who had once attended the private gatherings of years past, the image of Rock Hudson smiling beneath golden light remained both beautiful and haunting, for they knew that smile had never truly been his. 15 Raquel Welch, the sex symbol in the gilded cage. In the early 1970s, Raquel Welch was the face every magazine wanted, the star every director hoped to cast. But to remain at the top, she relied not only on beauty and talent, but also on the backing of a discreet circle of wealthy power brokers men who held influence in Hollywood and seats at political dinners in Washington. This circle shielded Raquel in every way: blockbuster contracts, massive publicity campaigns, and absolute silence from the press when it was needed. In return, she was expected to appear at private soirees attended by studio moguls, congressmen, and figures whose names alone could make reporters fall silent. These evenings were never just about parties. They were secret meetings, discreet trips with no official photographs allowed to exist. Raquel would arrive, smile, and vanish, as if she had never been there. Yet with each appearance, another piece of her freedom slipped away. In 1974, while filming The Four Musketeers in Spain, a European photojournalist caught wind of a private meeting scheduled to take place in her hotel. He lay in wait in the hallway, but was stopped by security just a few meters from her door. His camera was confiscated, though rumors spread fast enough for a French paper to prepare an exposé. Just hours later, Raquel left the set claiming sudden illness and was immediately whisked away in an unmarked black car to the airport. 3 weeks later, an American paparazzo spotted her leaving a Beverly Hills psychiatrist's office, her face hidden behind dark glasses, hair pulled back neatly so unlike her usual glamorous image. The photo was bought the same day and never published. Within the industry, it was whispered that this had been her third consecutive visit to the famed psychiatrist known for counseling politicians in crisis. A former colleague once said a gilded cage is beautiful, but it's still a cage, and it crushes the one inside. And Raquel knew that if she broke it, no one would be there to save her. 16 Sophia Lauren, Carlo Ponti's Private Parties, and A Marriage as a Shield. Before she became a global cinematic icon, Sophia Lauren was once the precious gem of the Italian screen discovered and nurtured by the famed producer Carlo Ponti, who was 22 years her senior. In the public eye, Ponti was both her lover and the launchpad that propelled her to the peak of her career. Yet within industry circles, the story took on a different hue. Many rumors claimed it was Ponti himself who introduced Sophia to discreet evening gatherings reserved exclusively for the powerful elite of Rome and Milan. These parties were nothing like ordinary social events. The guest lists brought together media tycoons, Hollywood producers, renowned politicians, and wealthy businessmen from across Europe. Sophia appeared at Ponti's side as his muse introduced with deliberate care to each guest, raising glasses of red wine and offering soft smiles under the warm golden lights. Then, one night in 1961 at a villa on the outskirts of Rome, an inebriated guest crossed the line. The incident grew tense enough that an American businessman had to swiftly pull Sophia outside while inside the remaining guests had yet to grasp what had just occurred. Only hours later, whispers of a mishap at Ponti's party began to leak, threatening the pristine image the two had worked so hard to build. Ponti knew that if the Italian or international press got wind of it, not only Sophia's career, but also his own reputation would collapse. A few months later, despite the legal complications surrounding divorce and remarriage in Italy at the time, Ponti announced his marriage to Sophia Lauren in Mexico. Many believed it was a shrewd move to legitimize their relationship, making her his lawful wife a solid shield against any scandal. Their 22-year age gap became a subject of public chatter for years. But for those who had attended those exclusive nights of power, the marriage was not born solely out of love. It was also a strategy to bury a secret no one dared to speak of again. 17 Grace Kelly. Rumors and a ticket bought with silence. Before becoming Princess of Monaco, Grace Kelly endured struggling years in Hollywood in the early 1950s. At that time, she was merely a B-list actress, taking minor roles in forgettable films. Within media circles, rumors swirled that Kelly had been introduced to a shipping magnate with deep connections to major studios in New York and Los Angeles. It was said that just weeks after a discreet meeting at a Manhattan hotel, Kelly unexpectedly landed a role in Mogambo, 1953, the film that earned her an Oscar nomination. But along with the opportunity came a silent threat. In 1954, while Kelly was filming Rear Window with Alfred Hitchcock, a brown envelope arrived directly on set. Inside were 3 photographs taken at that same Manhattan hotel years earlier, not explicit, but enough to unleash a media storm if made public. Alongside them was a handwritten note with a chilling message, an opportunity in exchange for silence, if you know what's good for you. That very night, Kelly left the set and boarded a flight to Philadelphia. Days later, rumors emerged that a large sum had been transferred to an account in the Bahamas, and the envelope of photographs had vanished. Kelly returned to the film set without a word of explanation, and production continued as if nothing had happened. Later, as Princess of Monaco, Grace Kelly never spoke of those struggling years. But at private gatherings of former Hollywood stars, whispers persisted that the ticket that took Grace to glory was purchased not solely with talent, but with a price only she knew in full. 18 Faye Dunaway, a role bought with silence. If Grace Kelly chose silence to advance, Faye Dunaway, the breakout star of the 1970s, did not shy away from stepping into private parties to secure roles, even knowing well the power traps that lay in wait. In 1973, Dunaway was at the height of her career, after the successes of Bonnie and Clyde and Chinatown. Yet she still craved a major role in a studio's epic production. The door seemed wide open until Martin Alcott, a powerful director nicknamed the Oscar King, extended an invitation to a private dinner in Beverly Hills to discuss script ideas. The gathering took place in a luxurious hilltop mansion, soft golden light, reflecting off the pool guests mingling over glasses of champagne. At first, it resembled a typical industry social, but barely an hour later, Dunaway noticed several guests slipping away from the living room, leaving only a few men whose eyes were fixed on her. Alcott approached smiling and invited her to talk in the back garden. As they walked down the hallway, she realized the back door was shut with two unfamiliar men blocking the way. The music faded into the distance, and the suggestive remarks turned into blunt demands if she wanted the role she had to show her cooperation. There was no shouting, no chaos. Only a closed room scrutinizing stares and an atmosphere any actress of that era knew could not be resisted. Dunaway left the party at dawn, her face pale and frozen. 3 weeks later, a press release confirmed Faye Dunaway had secured the lead role in Alcott's epic. The film was a massive success, earning her an Academy Award. Yet in the years that followed, Dunaway avoided long interviews and never answered any questions about that night in Beverly Hills. As one veteran producer once whispered, Faye's price wasn't in the contract, it was in the night everyone knew about, but no one dared to mention. 19 Rita Hworth, the trap set by her own family. Before she became known as Hollywood's legendary red-haired goddess, Rita Hworth was just a girl named Margarita Carmen Cancino, growing up in a poor family of dancers in Brooklyn. Her father, Eduardo Cancino, was a well-known flamenco dancer in the small stage circuit, but he carried both grand ambitions and crushing debts. When Rita was only 13, Eduardo began taking her to nightclubs in Tijuana and Los Angeles, explaining that it was to train for performance. Yet these shows were not just about dancing. After the act ended, Eduardo would often arrange private tables where Rita had to sit and converse with older men, many of them nightclub owners, B-movie producers, or powerful businessmen. One night in 1932 at a club in San Diego, Rita was asked to stay behind to practice some moves with an investor. When she turned to her father with a hesitant look, Eduardo simply said, "If you want to be famous, you have to learn how to please them." That night, Rita realized she had just been pushed through a door that led only to locked rooms. From that moment on, every time she stepped onto a stage or walked onto a film set, she felt someone's gaze upon her, a reminder that every opportunity she had came from nights that would never appear on any written record. From then on, saying no became almost impossible. As Rita rose to stardom at Columbia Pictures, that past was buried under flawless publicity campaigns. But for those who had witnessed the night a 13-year-old girl was led into that private room, Rita Hworth would forever be tied to the trap set by her own family and a door that would never open for her escape. 20 Ava Gardner, The Debt in New York and The Invisible Chain. At 20, Ava Gardner was just a Southern girl with a strong North Carolina accent arriving in New York with hopes of changing her life. At first, she worked as a receptionist at a small hotel near Times Square. But that job became the doorway into the world of elite clubs where neon lights, fine wine, and powerful hands intertwined behind thick velvet curtains. One winter night in 1943, Ava caught the attention of Delia Montrose, a club manager, famous for training young women to become companions for tycoons and Hollywood big shots visiting New York on business. Delia told her simply, "All you need to do is show up, smile, and keep everything quiet, and anything you want will come your way." At first, Ava only chatted, raised a glass, and left with a thick envelope in her purse. But once the new dresses, sparkling jewelry, and luxurious apartment made her accustomed to a lavish lifestyle, she began receiving subtle reminders. You still have a few nights unpaid. This debt was never measured in money. It came in the form of increasingly daring requests, private dinners, weekend trips with a theater mogul, or appearing arm in arm with a politician to quash an unfavorable rumor. Whenever she refused, Ava would receive a photograph or a gentle reminder. We still have everything. Even after she became famous in Hollywood, the chain from New York never loosened. She could be offered a major film role, but could just as easily be summoned back to the city at any moment. In the industry, whispers circulated about auditions where Ava didn't even read the script one phone call from Delia, and the role was hers in exchange for a sleepless night in some penthouse. Ava Gardner once confided to a friend, "I could buy anything except freedom." And that debt in New York imprisoned her throughout her career. 21. Kirk Douglas, The Secret Deal and the Leak decades later. In 1946, returning from World War II with a medal and a few supporting roles on Broadway, Kirk Douglas began catching the attention of Hollywood, which was searching for new faces for post-war epics. Paramount Studios took interest in him, but with it came an unspoken condition. Douglas had to attend a private meeting with two producers and a mysterious investor who held a major stake in the theater chain. That night, at a luxurious Bel Air mansion, Douglas was introduced to figures he had only read about in newspapers. The conversation lasted until dawn and ended with an agreement that would never be put on paper. The lead role in Champion 1949 would go to Douglas in exchange for his attendance at a number of private social events arranged by the group. Champion became his big break, launching Douglas into A-list status. But the price was years of appearing at parties where no reporters were allowed, places where Hollywood's biggest decisions were made over the clinking of glasses and off-the-record promises. It seemed the past was buried until the summer of 1987, when a small Nevada entertainment magazine published an exposé by a former server from that Bel Air party. The piece detailed how Douglas was given special treatment and hinted that his lead role wasn't earned by talent alone. Within 2 days, the article vanished from newsstands without explanation, but photocopies had already circulated in the industry, ensuring that any interview Douglas gave about Champion afterward always contained an unexplainable pause. A director who once worked with him remarked Douglas always glanced around before speaking, as if afraid someone was listening. Maybe he knew that some nights in Bel Air are best left unspoken. 22. Gregory Peck, becoming the companion of high society ladies to make ends meet. Before he ever strode across the stage to claim an Academy Award, Gregory Peck had endured a quiet struggle to survive in New York in the mid-1940s. At the time, the name Gregory Peck meant nothing to the public. All people saw was a tall young man with a bright, handsome face, impeccably dressed, often spotted at cocktail parties or art events, always at the side of wealthy ladies from Manhattan's high society. Peck had agreed to work as a companion, a discreet job, yet enough to cover his rent, his acting school tuition, and the tailored suits that kept up his image. His clients were mostly female business owners, wives of politicians, or gallery owners, women who needed an attractive face and refined manners when appearing in public. One evening in 1945, Peck was invited to a party at a lavish penthouse in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Unbeknownst to him, behind the framed paintings on the walls, a hidden camera system was silently recording everything. This was the private amusement of a media tycoon who happened to be there that night. Years later, when Peck had become a Hollywood star, an envelope was delivered directly to his dressing room on set. Inside was a blurred photograph, but clear enough to make out he was seated closely beside a famous female politician, his eyes and gestures going far beyond polite conversation. A single note accompanied it. "You still remember the night at the Waldorf, don't you?" From that moment, Peck understood he had become a pawn in someone else's game. Whenever he received a special invitation, whether to a Beverly Hills party, a Washington, D.C. event, or a yacht trip with the elite, he was obliged to attend. No contracts, no explanations, just an unspoken rule: if you want peace, play your part in silence. 23. Lauren Bacall, entertaining a powerful director to land a film noir role. In 1943, when Lauren Bacall arrived in Hollywood, she was just 19 years old, with piercing feline eyes and a signature smoky husky voice. That beauty quickly caught the attention of top directors in the film noir genre, men who were searching for a leading lady for their crime and espionage scripts. At private gatherings in the home of director Howard M. A celebrated yet rumor-shrouded figure, Bacall was often invited to join the entertainment after the official guests had left. In these games, only a handful of Hollywood's most powerful men were present, and Bacall quickly understood her presence was not simply for drinking and conversation. In return, her name appeared in the cast list for To Have and Have Not 1944, the film that would make Bacall an icon. The arrangement did not end there. Whenever a new project began, she would receive a dinner invitation from Howard M., or one of his closest associates. One night in 1946, at a penthouse on Sunset Boulevard, a newly hired server accidentally opened the door to a room where Bacall was discussing a script with 3 men. The man told friends about what he saw, and the story began to spread. Within 48 hours, he was fired and disappeared without a trace, while Bacall was immediately scheduled to begin shooting a new film, as if to smother all whispers. Though she went on to become one of cinema's great legends, Bacall never publicly mentioned Howard M. in interviews. But in private conversations, she once said, "I made a lot of noir films. But the real darkness was something that stayed with me all my life." 24. Joan Crawford, recounting her past as a sex worker in Kansas City before MGM. Before she became MGM's formidable queen, Joan Crawford was still Lucille Fay LeSueur, a young woman who grew up among the smoke-filled bars of Kansas City. In 1922, at just 17, she worked as a waitress in a small club on Main Street. The income wasn't enough to live on, and according to a former coworker, Lucille started taking clients after hours so she could pay for a room and a few decent dresses. Her customers were mostly local businessmen or playboys who knew well that this was no ordinary bar. Every arrangement was discreet, and for Lucille, it was simply a temporary way to survive. 7 years later, Lucille had transformed into Joan Crawford, MGM Star magazine cover girl living in a Beverly Hills mansion. But one summer afternoon in 1935, as she prepared for a press conference for her latest film, a package arrived at her estate. Inside was a photograph of her sitting beside a middle-aged man in a Kansas City boarding house, the dim yellow light casting shadows, and the young girl's face unmistakably that of Lucille Fay LeSueur. The photo came with a scrawled note. "We had a wonderful time on Main Street. Now it's your turn to return the favor." The sender was a former regular client, now the owner of a theater chain in the Midwest. Crawford knew that if the picture surfaced, her career would be destroyed. That night, she had her driver take her to a Chicago hotel to meet the man. The meeting lasted exactly 1 hour. Afterward, he left with a small suitcase, and Crawford returned to Hollywood as if nothing had happened. The story never reached the press, but in industry circles, the saying went Joan Crawford wasn't just a product MGM molded. She knew how to erase her past as quickly as she could erase a reel of film. If Joan Crawford could wipe away all traces of Kansas City Natalie Wood, the bright young star of the 1960s, could not escape the secret studio-arranged parties where her childhood ended in a single night. 25 Natalie Wood, childhood ended in a single night. In 1946, at just 8 years old, Natalie Wood became a household name in America thanks to her role in Miracle on 34th Street. Everyone believed she would grow up under Hollywood's protective embrace, but few knew that it was the very power brokers at the studio who pushed her into darkness. When Wood turned 16, a Warner Brothers executive invited her and her mother to a celebration dinner for a new project at a Hollywood Hills mansion. Her mother believed it was the perfect opportunity for her daughter to land her first lead role. But the dinner had only a handful of men, including several powerful directors and producers. Her mother was escorted to the garden for a private chat, while Natalie was led downstairs to the basement screening room. The door closed the projector word to life, but what appeared on the screen was not a movie, just hazy images accompanied by faint laughter from behind her. That night, Natalie's childhood ended, leaving a cold void in her eyes. Soon after, Warner Brothers announced Natalie Wood as the star of a major production backed by an extravagant publicity campaign. But behind the scenes, she received a chilling reminder: remember who put you here. Years later, Wood confided to a friend, "I came into Hollywood as a child, and in just one night I wasn't a child anymore." Natalie Wood's story was no exception. From Marilyn Monroe to Ava Gardner, from Clark Gable to Gregory Peck, every legend of the Golden Age may carry a past that Hollywood never wanted the public to know. Hollywood created an eternal aura of glamour, but behind every smile, every poster, and every award are wounds history tries to bury. And if these secrets make you shudder, wait until you hear about the most mysterious murders and disappearances in the movie capital, where the truth is darker than any film noir ever made. 26 Errol Flynn, the scandalous trial and the party that never ended. Before becoming the most dashing Robin Hood ever to grace the silver screen, Errol Flynn was already a man who made Hollywood both admire and fear him. From the late 1930s, with his mischievous eyes, half-smile, and free-spirited demeanor, he was the top choice for swashbuckling heroes. But beyond the dazzling lights of the soundstage, Flynn was equally famous for all-night parties where strong liquor and beautiful women were never in short supply. In 1942, Hollywood was shaken when Flynn was accused of having relations with two underage girls during two private gatherings on the California coast. In court, prosecutors detailed locked rooms, cocktails poured without pause, and whispers that America's Robin Hood had been playing a dangerous predator's game. Flynn denied all charges, smiling as he walked out of the courtroom, and was ultimately acquitted. Yet the incident left behind an unspoken rule: whenever there was a party that got too loud, Flynn was certain to be there, not merely as a guest, but as the very soul of the gathering. Many in the industry knew that though he had avoided prison, he had become indebted to the powerful figures who had stood behind him. In return, he was always present when needed, from a yacht party with an oil tycoon in Mexico to nights of hard liquor in a Las Vegas penthouse where only a handful of familiar faces were allowed and not a single photograph was permitted to escape. Flynn died in 1959 at the age of 50, taking with him a trove of secrets those involved still keep. In the press, he will forever be the immortal Robin Hood. But in Hollywood's whispered lore, Errol Flynn stands as a reminder that sometimes the spotlight and the shadows do not merely run parallel, but entwine so tightly they can never be undone. The dazzling light of Hollywood's golden age could make everything shimmer like a dream. But when the curtain falls, the truth can sometimes be darker than any noir film. The stories you've just heard are only the tip of the iceberg, while buried deep beneath lie countless secrets that Hollywood has worked tirelessly to conceal for decades. So, what do you think about what has just been revealed? Are these merely isolated incidents, or are they signs of an entire hidden system operating behind the glittering lights? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to continue exploring more shocking secrets of the entertainment world with us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos.